Hey everyone, Angelo here, Hollywood filmmaker, greatest screenwriter in the history of the world, recovering hobo. I want to talk about this trend I've seen of Gen Zers on TikTok complaining about working 40 hours a week. They say their jobs are too hard. They don't have free time for themselves. They have to commute too long, and on weekends they have to do chores. They don't have time for themselves. Let me tell you something. I'm 38 now. When I was 20, I worked a full-time job, went to college full-time, had an internship, took piano and trumpet lessons, which I practiced near daily, and I never complained about it. So there are a few words that come to mind about these Gen Zers complaining. Lazy, entitled, spoiled. All words that I would have said when I was 20 because I was a bootlicking young capitalist myself who bought propaganda from corporations that employers are righteous, the employees should be grateful for what they get, and if you want to advance in this culture we have, you just have to work harder and sacrifice more of your life. Well, to you Gen Zers out there, I say, right on. You're speaking your lived, authentic truth. And the reality is, we've been brainwashed to think that 40 hours a week at many jobs is acceptable, and that the low pay we get is something we should be grateful for. And the meager worker protections we have, combined with the lack of tenant protections and lack of housing we have, the lack of a social safety net, is anything but barbaric. Corporations and conservative media, and a lot of liberals too, this is ingrained in liberals as well, are pushing back against these videos. They're hysterical about it. They don't like that you're speaking out about your lived experience, which should tell you something. It should tell you how powerful your voices are. I was a young conservative, and then I became a young libertarian, and over time, I just gradually started listening to people more, having my own lived experiences more, and seeing how this system just doesn't work out. I was homeless for a time, for 2.5 years. I've had money. I've been broke most of my life. You all are speaking to something in which you're realizing like just how wrong this thing is. You may not be able to explain it all. You may attribute blame to the right or wrong areas, depending on your point of view. But notice how conservatives and corporations, corporate media, advertising, the way public opinion is shaped in general, have us convinced that corporations, employees, there's something official about them, there's something righteous about them. And it makes it very easy for them to overwork, especially the youth, especially young workers who are scared of speaking out, who don't want their future careers to be negatively affected, who are scared of speaking about the broader set of working conditions in our society, aside from just specific acts of malice or neglect or abuse, wage theft, being made to work overtime without pay. It's so easy for employers to abuse us in a broader spectrum of behavior than just those acute and sometimes shocking incidents in which there's actual like malice or neglect or an employee death or someone being maimed. There's so much more to our lives than work. And what you Gen Zers are realizing is you have a powerful voice. Think about who conservatives and people who support big corporations, executives, and just general like commenters online who are like unpaid PR for these companies, like furious, like, no, you shouldn't be speaking about, I do this thing with my mouth because it's like poison comes out of their bloodstream up to their mouth when they speak. So it kind of pains their mouth. Like, you shouldn't be speaking against corporations. You see, they actually make lots of money, and money is virtuous. That's actually a pretty special thing. God wants you to make money. God made them better than us. That's what you deserve to be poor if you're working and you're not making more money. You shouldn't be an unskilled laborer. There are people who actually believe that this this mass sort of delusion. You could call it a mass psychosis in which people buy in to the idea that people who are more deserving get paid more and people who are undeserving get paid less. This is all totally up to us and our perception. Perception. And Gen Zers, what you're realizing is the measure to which these conservatives and the people who uphold the hyper-commodification of our lives get angry and push back and criticize you is the extent to which you threaten their dominance. You threaten their exploitation. You threaten their ability to exploit you for your labor. While you're scraping out a few dollars an hour, they're reaping the profits of your labor, of work that's not meaningful in most cases, of work that is dehumanizing, degrading, that doesn't fundamentally contribute to what we're doing. There's no real need for like hundreds and hundreds of different types of like whatever product that could be well serviced if it was quality, whether it's food, whether it's cell phones, whatever. Yeah, there can be a variety in everything, but a lot of like meaningless work is there because there's a market for it for employers to exploit you on. Meaning there's nothing innovative about what? New type of cookie that's packed with sugar that keeps you addicted, that gets Americans obese. Like over 40% of Americans are obese, and we don't have proper food distribution. We have food hoarding by these big companies, and then the employees who are worked like mules, who are subjected to public abuse, who are underpaid, who don't have job protections, who have to decide, do I want to stay home if I'm sick? Or do I want to miss out on rent or utilities or car payments? You Gen Zers are speaking something very powerful that I didn't have much awareness of when I was younger. And of course, it was a different time. Like YouTube wasn't around until I was a certain age, like 20. Other social media wasn't really around. Things didn't travel the way they do now. And you certainly, unless I suppose you had like your own website and a high-speed internet connection, could post videos. And even if you did, people would have to email them to each other. You couldn't even text links to each other. You'd have to email each other links, and that's how stuff would go viral. You're actually speaking to something that corporate leaders can never acquire, they cannot pay for, which is authenticity. They need to create this image, this prestige, this illusion. Think about how in grocery stores, everything's so nicely wrapped. Everything's got to have a great design on it. And if it doesn't, it kind of communicates, oh, it's the cheaper brand. You don't want this one as much. Again, this is just whatever the market dictates is really whatever is profitable for the executives and the shareholders. If that means firing half the labor force, if that means cutting your hours, if that means physically abusing you all, so be it. That's what the market dictates. You're all realizing that you're under this like regime of wage slavery in which we have like images in our movies, in our culture, in our advertising that show people of a higher status as somehow being more worthy or deserving more than regular people. The reality is our status is totally up to us. We can decide that. And when you're speaking out about it, you're taking back some of that power, that imagery that previously was like gate kept behind corporate governance and politicians who, can you believe the nerve of these politicians who complain, well, people don't want to go to work if you give them a good social safety net and unemployment. Yeah. What does that mean for employers if people would rather not work than get a job? It means the jobs are not that good. And if there is no social safety net, or in America, we have a very, very weak one. You can get food stamps that do not pay for food for the month, that are hard to keep. Welfare doesn't pay much, hard to get disability, and disability is treated almost like a punishment for being disabled. You barely have enough to survive, but in many cases, you're not able to work. That is to say, if you work and you're disabled, you could lose your disability payments. So without an alternative, it's funny that we have this idea of, oh, competition will solve everything. But yet employers don't fundamentally have competition for you when you don't have an alternative to working. If we had proper social safety nets, if we had communities that worked meaningful work for our own support and then could give us free time for our lives, then what would the market bear out? What would people choose? Would they choose meaningless work for companies that will scrape in profits off their labor and scrape out just a little bit? Here you go. You get the nail filings for yourself, and we get all the gold for the executives. People who can't afford their own groceries, who work at grocery stores, people who can't afford childcare, people who can't afford health care. And young people are seeing this, and good for them. They're speaking up to something that's undeniable, and it rattles conservatives, liberals, and the sort of status quo of people who believe, like these politicians say, people don't want to work, so they're lazy. Employers say people are lazy, they don't want to work. Well, why don't you be a less shitty employer? Why don't you be a less shitty politician and actually encourage workplaces to be better? Not just encourage them, do something, take action, mandate it. If the alternative to employment is so horrible, it's homelessness, it's disease, it's death, it's poverty, it's isolation, starvation, loneliness, and a lot of those things are synonymous with work regardless. But if the alternative to work is that's not much of a competition for employees. And what that means is, with the idea supposedly settled that employers are noble, enterprising people better than us, they're the planners of the future, they're taking the risk of employing us in their business, it makes it easy, with that issue supposedly settled, to look the other way then and say, well, they're noble, they're higher, they're like the priest class, and we're all the poor, lonely congregants and sinners who come to them and give them alms and desire to be sanctified by them and made more virtuous through working for them. That makes it a whole lot easier and a whole lot more appealing to become an employer, to become a profiteer, to become an exploiter, when you know you can do it so easily, and politicians and advertising and ordinary people who are screwed over by the system, but are often taught to blame not the rich, not the exploiters, but other poor people, poor black people, poor brown people, poor women, transgender people, etc. You can list down the people that we're taught to blame. White supremacy is hand in hand with this system. It's up and down, crosses left to right. It's much easier for employers to know, especially for young people who don't have the same lived experience someone my age does, who's been tested, who's gone through hardship and learned a lot of ways to cope with it, and who's gone through things that you wouldn't want to go through. It's so much easier for them to abuse you because there needs to be no real cover-up. Nothing needs to be done. You're already in a mindset of scarcity and poverty. You're already scared of the possibility of losing your job, of losing a good career. And so, aside from just the indignity of being overworked, doing meaningless work, not being paid what you make for the company, of having to commute far because, again, white supremacist and capitalist policies have separated us out in our cities from the urban cores. People rely too much on cars and they want to get away from it was white people who wanted to get away from the cities, who would be green lined for home loans, whereas black and brown people would be red lined. I could go on about all that. I couldn't even address it all in one video. They know it's easier to physically abuse you, whether that's put you in dangerous conditions, overlook safety standards, make you work while you're sick, make you come to work in dangerous conditions, commuting as unpaid labor, emotionally abuse you in all kinds of ways, abuse your time, and sexually exploit you. How many employers have have this power over people where they know you're at a severe disadvantage. The power dynamic is not in your favor if they sexually harass you or physically sexually assault you. I've been through all types of unpleasant situations at work. Yeah, just the ordinary, like, just everyday meaninglessness of it, that can be bad. Being severely underpaid, and especially when you're young, it's like, well, the employers don't pay you enough to live. Your parents or roommates subsidize their paychecks for you. These companies wouldn't pay a dime in income tax if they don't have to. Many of them don't. And yet, who's taxed to pay for all the infrastructure that they profit from? The roads, the trains, which are underfunded, the highways, the utilities. It's us, the taxpayers. It's on our income. And I can speak to, just that experience, which I didn't have the words to voice when I was younger. I was sort of forming it, sort of learning like, oh, these customers at this movie theater I work at, a lot of them just seem to hate us and like resent us. And seeing the racial disparities, like over time, it just informs the ethnic disparities and like who's working the service jobs, who's working the better paying jobs. I'm like, this isn't a problem of one company, one employer, whatever. This is a system-wide problem that's been cultivated for hundreds of years. Physically abused, like, having to work when I was sick, work through unpaid breaks, work unpaid overtime. Knowing if I speak out, think about it, I'm like fundamentally like undermining a whole company and saying, yeah, you're all doing things wrong. Being gouged at the other end for rent. I was homeless for 2.5 years. So, and I was working 10 months of that. And that's aside from I was working on film sets a lot, making YouTube videos, taking little side gigs whenever I could, anytime I could. $20,000 plus in debt. A lot of that coming from paying for cars, which again, speaking of our infrastructure, if we had proper transit options, I didn't know what I didn't know, but I easily spent over $30,000 over the course of 10 years on cars. Could have been put to better use if I had thought ahead and realized, oh, a car does not inherently equal independence. Having multiple ways of getting around does, and being able to live close to the places you want to go to does. And so as a result, for years, I was just crushingly lonely, couldn't afford to go out, was scared to go out and spend money. Working jobs where the jobs weren't all inherently bad a lot of the time. I just hated myself at them because I was lost. Had so many problems, didn't know what mental health was, didn't realize how much I had been traumatized by my experiences. And that's on top of this conservative and business-oriented men in white suits rhetoric that I bought into for so long. That became unfurled like day after day, year after year, until I would just see myself as like, oh, I'm unrecognizable from what I was before. If my 20-year-old self saw me now, my 20-year-old self would be so upset with who I am now, would be beside myself in grief. Like, no, there's no way I would become that. But yes, there is a way I would become that. And then, so I mentioned physical, emotional abuse, wage theft, and then sexual abuse. I was sexually harassed at my job for 6 months. A living hell. And why do you think I thought it was such a bad idea to speak up? I can't speak about the whole experience I had there. It was a living hell. And I knew it's bad for you, like, Angelo, it is a bad idea to report this. What you have seen and what you know about HR tells you that. And when you have to report it, this still affects me to this day. This living hell of a lecherous pig, another guy, a male, who sexually harassed me for 6 months, who was a predator, being able to hide in plain sight, for me to report in this company to say, we don't find any evidence that he sexually harassed you. And having to live with this hell, being splintered from where I worked, it still affects me to this day. Every day it affects me. I have not begun to speak about the nightmare it was to go through there, to go through sexual harassment, to see the dynamics of where I work and be like, yeah, it's a bad idea to report this. Then to have to report it and to go through the nightmare and indignity of that and seeing what's in plain sight, which is like, this is bogus. This is a fake investigation. This is all bullshit. All I'm doing is giving you everything you need to fire me, showing you I'm unhappy here, showing you I see a very serious problem of discrimination, illegality, showing that I was actually retaliated against from my manager, who I reported to early on and who threatened me and spied on my social media. I knew, don't even bother, Angelo. Don't even bother saying everything I know. Because I'm not interested in these people's approval. I'm interested in just saving my own hide, which was my weakness in a way. Like just staying employed, keeping in the good graces of the film community, the film labor force. And there are no words for what I went through ultimately. But how common is this experience for people to go through this kind of abuse, where predators know they can wade through like a shark in a workplace and that they'll be protected, they'll have cover? That a creep like this, whose life is his cover because he has a girlfriend and a daughter, I wonder if he's trying to have more kids to prove what a virile heterosexual man he is, and how much he loves his girlfriend, and get all the love and support from people of having a new baby on the way, and also help keep his girlfriend, attached to him. Someone who can hide in plain sight in a workforce, not just hide there, be celebrated. That's what employment is for so many people. Maybe not that example, that drastic, that hellish. And believe me, it's scary to talk about this. It's scary because it's powerful. People do not want me talking about this. They don't want you talking about your experiences. So Gen Zers, I say, raise up your voices. Read, unionize, talk to each other, normalize sharing your painful experiences of work. It shouldn't take anything exceptional like the draining nightmare that I've gone through. And I was tested already when I went through this experience of sexual harassment. So I already could say I know myself, I have an integrity, I know how to sort of protect myself. I had been homeless, I had been abused, I had been through violence, I had been through all kinds of things. I had been sick for years. I've been crushingly, bitterly alone, where I felt like everyone was out at a party except me. And to see now, like, oh, a better world is possible. And young people are seeing that too. They're becoming more progressive. They're unionizing. They see how so much of our lives are encapsulated by financial transactions. You want to go out, you want to be with friends, you want to go on a date, you want to join some social network like in real life or online, you got to pay. There's a transaction. Flip some money over to some corporation. And as a result, we're so stratified, so atomized, and we're being fed this propaganda constantly of corporations are great, people don't want to work. Hey, it's black and brown people are destroying our cities. They're consuming our resources. Women don't want to be domestic servants and child bearers. This is horrible. What are we going to do about all these lazy people? Yeah, all they want is to inflict pain. Because I believe as Adam Serwer said, if I remember his last name, the cruelty is the point. There's nothing else to it. Like in Chinatown, I think Jake Giddy says, how many lobster dinners can you have? How rich do you need to be? How many people are prepared to go through what I went through? Not just with being sexually harassed at work, being just an everyday petty abuse, and no grand conspiracy behind it, no necessarily malicious effort, just the casual, everyday, ordinary stupidity, arrogance, and ignorance that govern people, that tell them, hey, keep this going, that we have a good thing. Hey, the system works because it works for me. How many people are prepared to face what I did at the other end of if you are a problem for your employer, which is to do what I did and go homeless. I was homeless for 2.5 years. I almost don't even respect the people at my job because I'm like, would you go homeless for what you believe in? It's obvious you wouldn't. It's obvious what you believe in is what governs you, which is fear and money. So how can I want your approval if I don't even respect you? Oh, that is a very dangerous, bad sentiment to even hint at. How seditious that sounds. And yet, I was homeless for what I believed in, among other things. How many people would stand being homeless for 100 days, 300 days, 500 days, 700 days, 900 days that I was homeless? And I can say some of my best moments were when I was homeless, the most beautiful moments. Because I was employed for 10 months, 5 months when I first went homeless, and then 5 months before I exited homelessness. I think, what does that make that? Like about 1.5 years where I didn't have a job. Now, again, I was working on film sets. I was making videos a lot. I was working on my screenwriting. So I was always busy, like consumed with stuff. But not having to work, such a great experience. That independence, I can't believe I had that. We can make a better world where we don't have to see everything in a financial transaction. We can actually just work for the common good just because we want to. We can have meaningful work, worker co-ops, strong unions, robust unions, strong and robust worker protection laws, strong tenant protections, free housing. Because imagine how employers would have to compete if they knew you had a viable alternative to employment, which is you can pursue your own passions, your own desires, your own art, your creativity, and you can afford to fail at it just as much as the richest people fail at whatever whim they get when they want to spend money on their artistic project, their own musical project, literature, song, art, well, song kind of similar to music, film, whatever. That it shouldn't bankrupt you. You shouldn't have to be cashing in your life to pursue your passion. It scares me to speak like this because I know how badly there are people who don't want people to speak like this. That what you all are saying is truly dangerous, and to that I say good for you. Let's make it not dangerous. Let's normalize it. Let's make it sort of dangerous in a sense. Not physically dangerous, but like dangerous in the idea of like, you're going to threaten the workers' rights, you're not going to be in business. Now, as it is, as they say, there's no ethical consumption in capitalism. And it's easy to walk into a store, as I'll do, and be wowed by the array of choices. And then to not think deeper about how much each of these represents excess, hoarding, waste, how much of this food and product is just going to be thrown away. And we have laws in place and protections for corporations so people cannot get access to this stuff they throw away. All the waste that goes on, and that's on top of the horrible working conditions for people who work in these service jobs, who make the foods that we eat, who build the products that we use, often disposable, cheap products that, again, if there's no market to make it more durable, to make a quality phone that lasts for years, what's the point? To make housing that, yeah, it's great for rich people that can afford it, and make housing like our own private fiefdoms instead of having communal areas, communities that are interconnected, where there are more chances for social interaction, for meaningful work, for inspiration. Two of the greatest joys that I've had since moving to LA, which I never planned on, are being in biking groups and group bike rides like Ciclavia, and being in rollerblading groups. They're the greatest joys in that this is giving lived witness to how joyous people-powered cities are. If you can, I recommend to people, if it's safe in your area, because the streets are not well configured for it a lot of times, and also it's expensive, it's an expensive hobby, anything. But if you can, get a bike, ride a bike sometimes if you have Metro bike services in your area, or like City Bike in New York. Get rollerblades, get a skateboard, a longboard, and try organizing a group of people to go ride out and see how much joy it is, and compare that with the experience of working. And that's what employers don't want you to see, is that there is a better, more joyous, healthier, happier life possible for workers. So you Gen Zers, I want you to know you're right on. You should be speaking your truth. Here's a little bit of an older person, again, 38, who says, like, you all are onto something powerful. And it's so weird seeing conservatives piss and moan about you all speaking up for yourselves, because I'm like, shouldn't we of the slightly older generation now, or older generation, whatever, shouldn't we want better for the next generation? Like, shouldn't we want you not to be miserable? Shouldn't we want you to have meaningful work? Like, yeah, okay, you all should, to the extent possible, be responsible for yourselves, treat others well, watch your own conduct, check your own conduct too, because we all slip up, we're all weak, we all get impatient, rude, frustrated, we all don't necessarily clean up after ourselves all the time, etc. Take up 2 seats on the bus, come on man, what's up with that? Take up 2 seats on the metro, that's less common. I see that. I do see it for certain, like, I've seen it in DC and here in LA, like older white guys who will sit with their briefcase next to them. Like, come on, man. What, are you scared someone's going to sit next to you? Someone less ideally of pigment sitting next to you? Whoa. So this video has gone on quite long. But Gen Zers, speak your truth. You don't realize how uplifting it is when voices come out in dissent against this horrible, cruel, calculated system. And just think, why so much backlash to it? Why in countries that have leftist and union movements been crushed with coups and death squads and the police brought in to kill protesters and demonstrators? Why? Because it is such an undeniable threat to corporate profits. I think back to the warehouse I worked, dipshit management at On Track warehouse in LA. Whoa, shit. Actually, not in LA. It was in, okay. Southern LA region. How the vast majority of the employees were somewhere around 20 years old, young Hispanic people. And then there were a few people like my age or older. I'm thinking, oh, how easy it is to exploit these workers, to work them to the bone in these conditions early in the morning, underpay them. That's the thing. I enjoyed the work. It was actually fun. I enjoyed unloading boxes. Being with the drivers were contractors. Fancy that. They didn't want to pay them as full-time employees. And whatever standards they had for hiring the drivers wasn't wasn't the same as the employees. So they were often abusive, cruel, would yell at us. One driver apparently punched my coworker. He was fired for that, in fairness. Fired like pretty summarily. But I just thought, like, these employees are so scared. Like, I tried talking to some about, like, hey, why don't we unionize? Every one of them's pissed terrified about it or thought it was hopeless. And I'm like, yeah, the younger ones, they're scared shitless of that, because I would have been too. They don't know the power that employees have, and they don't know, they don't foresee like what's possible with this. And also, I had the benefit of being homeless, where it's like I didn't have as much to lose in a way. I mean, I was living in my car, so yeah, if I lost my car, it would have been bad. But I'm like, I saw a viable way forward. But everyone here is scared. And yet, imagine if everybody walked out of there, how disastrous, how utterly catastrophic that would be for that company and their profits. That the products we were shipping, prepackaged meals, pet food, luxury items from like high-end, what do you call it, like jewelry or perfume stores, whatever you want to call them, cosmetic stores. How many of these products that we ship that we can't even afford ourselves? And I couldn't even, like, what could I do with prepackaged food? Like, that's in a refrigerator, like a box that was chilled. I had no refrigerator. I was homeless. How disastrous would it be for this company if we walked out for one day? How much power do you think we could exert? What keeps us from doing that is just fear. That's it. Fear of being replaced by someone else who was scared of going homeless or who needed to get a job. fear of people who, at the very least, just don't know how bad it could be for them, who don't want to be belittled or persecuted by the managers, as I was, for speaking up about safety issues. Oh, they did not like that. This is a cruel, barbaric system we operate under, in which the threat behind you speaking up about your employment situation is you being dropped onto the street where I was, homelessness. Granted, I lived in a car, so it was like a house on wheels. Still dangerous, lonely, painful. It's how I formed my character. It was like so deep, like it's still something that like I'm able to draw from, is meaningful and just an empowering experience. But people shouldn't have to do that. Or if you want to, like, it should be safer. We should have the option of doing it safely. Instead, what do? It's practically illegal to be homeless and sleep in most places. There's an emergency number to call if someone steals food, but there's no emergency number to call if you're hungry. Imagine that, how that works. The police are there to protect capital, to track you down and chase you down on the street if you shoplift. Yeah, some laws are loosening about that, but we have a system where the products people need shouldn't be products, and they shouldn't be hoarded. We can have a better way. We can have a strong Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that protects workers. We can have worker co-ops and democracy in the workplace, and it's going to depend in large part on young people who push back against this system. And one of the most powerful things you can do is speak about it. Because unlike voting, unlike writing an email or petition, signing a petition, all of these are intermittent things you do which may help and in fact may partially give some cover and prestige to the system by saying, hey, I participated in it. I took my shot at expression of my democratic values, and fair is fair. This other opponent won, or your opponent won, and then they sold out to corporate interests. And mysteriously, they don't have workers' well-being and tenants' well-being as in mind as when they were campaigning. So think about that. I hope it inspires a lot of you, motivates you to be connected with each other, to speak up. You have a powerful voice, Gen Zers. Don't doubt your lived experiences. Interrogate them. Go even deeper. Read. Share your stories with others. Consider what's valid about this that you're going through. And yeah, question whether it's valid. Maybe you're all wrong, so question it. But I think the evidence will bear out that you're righteous and that you're right on, and you shouldn't have to go through what I did, working a full-time job in college. Now, granted, I didn't have to work then because I was living with my parents. But for a lot of people, you do have to work in college, take classes full-time. I was doing an internship. I don't know how I managed to do 14-hour Saturdays, doing my internship in the morning, then work it at night for like a year. I wouldn't do that ever again. And that was before I was even 20. I was 19 when I started working, then into 20. But anyways, you shouldn't have to do all that. Shouldn't have to go through all the bitter loneliness I did, missing out on so much of your life, being confused, not having quality health care, being in debt, being broke, financing your life on a credit card, getting a car you can't really afford. Again, think about it if you can, to take public transit, to organize and petition for good public transportation in your area, or group bike rides. Please ride with friends. It will do so much for your mental health. May not cure all, but it's so uplifting. I've got such a positive charge. And the great thing about these group bike rides and rollerblading rides and skateboarding rides is no matter how many times I do them, they're even better the next time. It's not like something else, like eating sweets or something, where it's like you get sick of it. You can't take anymore. This just gets better and better. And I realize I get better as I do them. Not better than anyone else, just better at being myself. So speak out, raise your voice, connect with each other, read. You'll see you have a lot in common with many generations. And you have the ability to change so much because you're the next generation that's going to take over. Maybe my generation, more or less, age up and down, is kind of in power now, but it's yours that's going to be able to overtake us and make a better world, let alone things like the climate catastrophe. How on earth people will get by as that continues to bombard us? How people will survive when today we're expecting like up to 5 inches of rain in LA, and there's what, 50, 60,000 homeless people? There's got to be more than that. They can't count them all, especially people who are couch surfing or staying in motels intermittently or sleeping in their vehicles, as I was. How many people are going to die because of that? And when I heard the absolute crock of the city is urging homeless people to find shelter, I'm like, that's what you all can do. You all repaired the 10 freeway within a matter of days because you're so interested in making sure people can drive by car to get around. Where's that urgency to get people housed? In fairness to Mayor Bass, she has declared a housing emergency. So she's trying, apparently, but there's so many other people who stand in the way of getting proper housing, who actively fight it because they want their property values to be up. They want their property investments to be up. They want to hoard vacant housing to keep it as an investment property. But what the city also said is they're going to give out vouchers for motels to homeless people. How many vouchers in this city of at least 50,000 homeless people? 240. What a comical fucking joke. How ashamed should we be? Now, who's holding the city accountable for this? We need to speak up about this, because I can tell you from experience, it's so easy to go homeless. It's a lot harder to get housed again. There were so many days when I was homeless where I wondered, how am I possibly going to get housed? I don't know what job I can do. I don't know where I can afford to live. I don't know how I'll ever be able to secure housing and be stable and have a decent income. Now, I'm very lucky, even for all I've gone through, that I have been able to get those jobs. There are not many positions like the ones I've held in this country. So for most of you, you're not going to be able to get that. So what should we do? We should make a better world. We should speak out. We should speak out about requiring housing for everyone, quality food for everyone, healthcare for everyone, quality jobs, meaningful work, worker protections. Rise up in solidarity, people. Trust me, you have so much more power than you realize. I can imagine if I was a manager now and if I heard employees speaking like this, I'd have to make a clear choice. Am I with them or am I against them? Because that kind of talk is either seditious or it's revolutionary. And it's a peaceful revolution. It's one in which we can live as in communities, in solidarity, in support, and respect. There will always be problems, always be conflict. But think about what your bosses would have to behave like if there was one worker, one vote. You could vote out your bosses. If there was democracy in the workplace, if you had a choice of not working. So everyone, I encourage you to be well, exercise. I just want to say that. Ride a bike, skateboard, rollerblade if you can't. Be safe, have a partner. Rollerblading in particular, very, very tricky. But I love, now that I'm getting better at it, I'm like, oh, this is freedom. Freedom under my feet, wheels on my feet to fly me around. But it's an expensive hobby, and it's expensive not because I'm necessarily spending money week after week on rollerblades. I have them. I'll buy new wheels when I need them, or maybe a new set of rollerblades. But it's expensive in the time it takes. If you can't afford the time, it doesn't matter how much money you have. And for a lot of people who don't have time, it's not like they have money. They don't. So let me know what you think. Gen Zers, keep speaking your truth, and click like, all that stuff. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye.